We've only just begun.
You are now in the realm of enlightenment and transformation, as brought to you by the Foundational Friday. Our core aim is to present an experience, an opportunity for your soul to reascend to its place of origin by cultivating a healthier spiritual awareness and emotional maturity. This show serves as a free offering to the greater community and an addendum requirement for all ANU spiritual training students. For all those listening, if you'd like to move closer to the calculations and fundamental understandings of the ANU order, be sure to pick up the book, Grasping the Root of Divine Power. If you desire a spiritual reading to help you map your current spiritual position in the face of your world and learn the greatest pathways for your fortune in this season, you can go to the SaduluHouse.com. That is SADULUHOUSE.com. You can also go to OrishaReligion.com to find out how you can become a student and member of the new spiritual order. That's OrishaReligion.com. Let us begin.
Good evening all. This is Yuya Assaan-ANU, Chief Jegna of the ANU Spiritual Order and head instructor of the Sadulu House Spiritual Center for enlightenment, transformation, and all things that bring healing, growth, and empowerment to your spiritual, emotional, physical, mental, and astral body. On this evening, we'll be covering the energy, or more so I should say this show is dedicated to the concept and the tradition of the Sangoma. Okay, but before getting into that, I want to actually share some information for those who have emailed me and asked me a couple of questions via email. Well, there's been a lot of questions via email. I can't get to all of them tonight, but I'm going to answer a few of them. On the third Fridays of every month is when I'll actually be taking in live questions. So that is a time when you want to call in with your live questions and your concerns and your comments and your observations and so forth and so on. And that is the day that I have committed and sanctified for us to have our dialogues with one another, where I can give you some information in real time. So also, I want to give a heads up again to all my West Coast people. In a few days, I will be in the California area doing some work with someone. So if anybody wants to link up, consultations, readings, any spiritual work that you may need done, consecrations as well, if you're ready to be consecrated to the Orisha that you're working with, this now is the time. Reach out to me and we can link up while I'm out there. Also, if anyone is aware of any bookstores, esoteric or cultural bookstores that would be interested in carrying the ANU books, reach out to us as well so we can get our books into your favorite stores out there and hopefully start up some groups in your area. That's one of the key things about establishing some type of presence in the local bookstores, is because it helps for our furthering work of establishing study groups. People will have a different type of connection, and a lot of times study groups can just start off with book groups, and that has been a request of a lot of the students and people who listen to the show. They've been wanting some one-on-one interaction and really to link up and join with people of like minds in the areas that they're in. Well, this is how it begins. So again, all of my West Coast people, reach out to me if you'd like to get together while I'm out there. You can reach out at questions@anunation.org. That's the word questions at ANUNATION.org. Don't do like the people in the South did. Waited till I got back and everybody was emailing me. So reach out ahead of time and we'll try to set up something while I'm out there. Again, as always, make sure you tune in to Anu Asafo this Sunday at 1 p.m. With our brothers Ifawumi, Wole Ifa and our dear sister Omilade. Okay, I'm sure it will be an excellent show. And I know last Sunday, a lot of people had a lot of good feedback on it. And speaking of feedback, for all of you who have picked up the book and you've enjoyed it, make sure you leave a review on Amazon. For those of you who listen to this show, like on iTunes, leave a review on iTunes. Okay, review the work and let people know what you think of. Even those who have gotten spiritual consultations, go to the Orisha religion website or the Sadulu House website and leave comments. Leave comments on the site as to, if you enjoyed your reading and, what you got out of it and things like that. Because a lot of times you all reach out to me and let me know, it's been incredible. Thank you so much for the reading and things like that. And oftentimes people always comment on the affordability of the readings, how they really should be priced maybe about 3 or 4 times as much as they actually are. One of the ways that you can give back is by giving reviews. Support the ANU Nation, support the order and all the work that we're doing. Encourage your friends and family to pick up the books, buy them, for people as gifts. Kwanzaa's coming forth, but also what's really important, and it doesn't cost you anything, leave a review. Leave a review on the books. If you have a half an hour to send me a 3-page email asking me a bunch of questions that I answer for you, free of charge, then, take 5-10 minutes and leave a review on some of the work that we're doing. Make sure that you're following the shows. Sign up for the newsletter so you know when I'm traveling and when the specials are coming. Another important thing, we'll soon be setting up a dedicated line and email account for some of your customer service questions. So just be on the lookout for that. A lot of you have been sending me emails, and that is not the best way to do it. That is not even the right way to do it. If you're having troubles with your passwords on the Udemy site and things like that, you typically need to contact Udemy for that. But you can contact our customer service, and one of my student assistants will get back to you on that. They can move a lot quicker on the customer service issues. If you have any type of problems like that, I'm here for the spiritual, emotional, and counseling and consultation issues. Okay, so the emails get filtered and distributed based on the subject lines. All right, so when you send emails to me and they're for like passwords and things like that, it takes a very long time to respond because they're actually not filtered properly. Okay, so be on the lookout for that. We'll have a dedicated space for you to ask some of those questions, and if we need to, we'll direct you to the proper place to get the help that you need, if it's something that's not on our end. Okay, so again, I just want to share a little bit of housekeeping. Make sure if you're in the West Coast area, reach out, questions@anunation.org, and we can link up while we're out there, especially for those interested in starting in our new chapter on the West or wherever you're at. It's a good time where we can sit and speak about it. We have some other chapters being slowly formulated and built right now as we speak. So if you're in the Carolinas, the North Carolina area, or if you're in the New Orleans area right now, you need to reach out to us, questions@anunation.org. If you're interested in linking up with some people who are part of our new spiritual order and creating a space where I will also be visiting maybe monthly and giving some group classes as well. All right. So that's pretty much it in terms of our housekeeping. And I would like to get into first some of the questions that have been sent in via email before we cover this energy of the Sangoma. But this question comes from an Invincible. That's his name, Invincible. And it says, peace, Brother Yuya. I have a question. What is your take on the sigils from the Palo school of thought? I am from the Bahamas. I was thinking the same way you do when I was first introduced to the Yoruba system. You have cleared up a lot of confusion. One love. Okay. Well, we're dealing with sigils from Palo. We typically call those pontas, or they're called firmas. Okay, and those are, for those who are unfamiliar, a lot of times when you see any type of Palo ritual, or even when you see the inganga, and the inganga is that steel cauldron that you'll sometimes see in palo houses, or that you'll see paleros using for different ceremonies. And there's a series of symbols written on them. It almost sometimes looks like map symbols or compass symbols. And these are called firmas or pontas, very similar to our Vodun veves. Okay, and even very similar to other symbols that are used. So to answer that question, my take on sigils is the same on sigils in general, whether they be from Palo or whether they be the Kemetic symbols of the Ankh and Hotep and Ra. All of these things are utilized in order to unlock chambers in your own brain. And they invoke and they excite a certain aspect of you in order for it to have a conversation with a higher, what we could say extraterrestrial being. Okay, so what happens is that when you stare into these symbols, or you scry into them, or sigils as we call them as well, and sigils can be made many different ways. They're not just ancient cryptic symbols, but you can actually make your own sigils. You can make your own sigils with your own name, just by taking your name and removing the vowels and the double consonants and putting them together in a certain formation. Now, what happens is that your mind actually knows what it is. Like, for instance, let's say if your name was Matthew and you took out the A and you took out the E, so we're taking out the vowels, you would have MTTHW. Now, if you were reading that in a newspaper, magazine, or wherever, you would skip right through it knowing it said Matthew. You wouldn't even slow up and say, I wonder what word that is, because you already have a cognitive and visual recognition of that particular word. But when we're doing a sigil, we would also take out that double consonant, which would be that T, because Matthew is MATTHEW. So it would turn into MTHW. Okay. And whatever that sounds off as, let's say if you look at it MTHW and you say Matu, if that, let's say that's what it says to you, your brain knows that it's Matthew. Okay, but you can use that as a chant to keep your active consciousness from interfering with the work of your subconscious. Because what will happen is that if you keep saying Matthew, your brain's going to say, I wonder, the actor Matthew McConaughey, where's he from? In Matthew, that's a book in the Bible. So what happens is that your brain will start going all over the place, because it's going to use the fuel of that word to distract you from what you're trying to do. That's its job, to keep you distracted and to keep you earthbound. So what you would do is you would create it in a form which we call a sigil, where the active conscious mind is satisfied. It has something to chew on, but the subconscious mind gets fed, because subconsciously or subliminally, your mind and your brain knows exactly what that word is that's being called forth or used. Okay, so that's how we would use a sigil, or how we would create a sigil. That's just a very small example. Even if you look at the symbol for Louis Vuitton, right? If you look at the word love, LOVE, and you take out the vowels, you only have L and V, which is Louis Vuitton. Now, and one of my students pointed this out once. It was very interesting. I was teaching a class on sigils, and I brought up Louis Vuitton, LV, and she said, "Oh, love." So again, we're drawn to certain things because our subconscious mind understands, this is what they're saying. So does that mean that certain people, organizations, entities, or groups would use this same science, such as giving Louis Vuitton the same sigil representation of love? Would they use that in order to program us, or to persuade us and suggest us to do certain things, or to buy certain products? Certainly. Of course they would. And of course they do. Okay, so a sigil has that type of effect on your mind, and it can take you to a very high spiritual place, or it could just give you a natural suggestion or a level of closeness with an idea or a concept. So just like when you see Louis Vuitton, you're saying love whenever you see it, even if you're saying it silently within your mind. And as soon as you say love, of course, it's something that you want. So you got to have the bag, okay, or the whatever, right? So, sigils, I advocate the use of them, invincible. And the Apollo ones are not ones to really play with, because remember, a sigil invokes, instigates, and stimulates a certain aspect of you. And people think, especially with the Apollo ones, it's just like some scribbles on the ground. But each one of those arrows, each one of the directions, they mean something. You know, every cross that's put in, every squiggly line, it actually means something, and your brain knows exactly what it means. And it's important as you start using those type of sigils that you get an understanding of what they mean, because it's just like you may sniff something or you may taste something that has a certain effect on your physical body, but it was unbeknownst to you when you first ingested it or you first came in contact with it, but now you're having a physical reaction. Well, the same thing can happen spiritually and mentally. You can put something in front of you and it's doing its job. It's stimulating a certain part of you, but you may not have been aware that that's what was going to be stimulated. So now you're having a reaction and response, and you may not be able to trace where it came from. So I'm not advocating that you don't use sigils, but I would say start with something like an ankh, okay, before you start with the Apollo sigils, and use like an ankh and just study the various meanings of it. Obviously, we know when we look at it, it's the shape of a person. It's also the shape of a staff and a womb, so it represents the male phallus as well as the fallopian tubes. And when you see the two sides of it, when you understand electricity, you'll see the Ankh symbol in there. So we know that the Ankh is also a symbol for magnetism, and it can also be used to generate electricity. So there's various things that the Ankh actually does. So you start with that. And you get basic things. You can even use things like the Sankofa heart, okay, and get an understanding of why things are shaped a certain way that they are, and the different things that they can mean, and then scry into them. I would suggest that even the symbol for Ra, which is just a circle with a dot in the middle of it, because again, that dot, when we deal with Ra, the dot represents the middle form or the middle point that we all have to find in life. Okay, so the dot is not to the left of the cell or to the right, to the top or to the bottom, but it's actually directly in the middle. That's the middle point. And Ra, of course, we know in this representation, it's symbolized by the sun, meaning divine light. Okay, so you could use a sigil like that as well to enact and open up your first eye. Okay, the infinity symbol, things like that. So, sure, certainly do your sigil work. There's nothing wrong with it. Okay, I'm going to get into one more email before we get into the idea of the Sangoma. And this one comes to us from Brother Zahir. And I'm not going to read the whole thing because it's very long. Okay, and I know we can get to the meat of it pretty quickly. But basically, he says, I want to thank you for the dynamics, the various spiritual subjects with us, sharing various spiritual subjects with us. At around age 14, I gravitated towards Western occult sciences, which developed into a multi-layer intellectual catalog on various metaphysical studies. Now, 15 years later, several years ago, I began studying the idea of biological, interdimensional, and extraplanetary entities. By not having a teacher, guide, or group, I think I opened up the Pandora's box. Without being lengthy, I feel it's important that I brief you on this. It started as the sleep paralysis in which I stayed calm and focused without the usual panic. I recall several beings around me each evening, which included the so-called memory glitched. Months later, a ringing began inside of my head, which developed into a static inside my brain, primarily the frontal right lobe, which developed into cold crystal-like sensation throughout my entire body. The most exotic and fearful sensation I have ever felt, and now, not long after I encountered them, but was blocked from seeing clear by a piercing energy I believe emitting from them. One thing I have to make clear is that there appear to have been many different beings and entities, and even what appears to be a human, like with weird instruments. Some malevolent, others benevolent. Over the years, I have continued to study solitary of any organization or groupthink within my own privacy. I reached out to brothers like Dr. Valentine, A.A. Rashid, and others, but no response concerning the above. With all that I have studied, there have been some kind of glitch in the faculty of memory, which I believe is an intentional blockage. By who or what, I don't know. Brother, I don't have any money. We won't get into all that. Brother. Okay, so he gets into a little bit more. I'm just kind of skimming through, and okay, he speaks about a dream. Last night I was in a place of war and prisons. I was able to move about freely and observe with some kind of guide. I found myself alone, then came upon a mansion where I found another guide who lived in the house. Long with the past, man, people, and spirits gathered. Then a war kicked off at a point when some Vodun power was activated. Everyone was killing to gain this power and to be the last to gain the house. There was hundreds there. My guide and I who lived there once had to move about in stealth without drawing attention. People were even walking into the ocean outside the house with their children, upon which they would glow. I escaped the house, but was followed by death, and found myself back at the house where there was a fight between two very demonic-looking entities or people that has gained power from their many murders in the house. Somehow I found myself assisting one and beheading the other with this serpent weapon that bites off its head like a blender with 1,000 teeth. I had to find a narrow hallway to accomplish the take because the deity was too large in power and energy. With the other entity, I went back to the main corridor where many gathered, but fewer than before. When I awakened, I still felt like I was there. As I type now, I listened to the Orient Soul Part 2 for the 40th time. Okay. So I'm going to get into it. And as you can see, this brother has some very intense night visions. There's a lot going on with him. I hope everybody was able to follow. But I'm sharing this on the air too because lately I've been getting a lot of calls, questions, especially in people's readings about the intensity of their dreams or their night visions. So I want you to know you're not alone. Some people also have some far out stuff happening at night when they lay down. Okay, first off, brothers, I had to make this really quick. What's happening with you is that you're having beings who are actually fighting over you. That's the sensation you've been feeling. You said you've been studying about extraplanetary entities. What's happening now is you've created an opening with yourself where you've invited these entities to come work in you, with you, and through you. But the problem is you haven't designated who can do it. So they're actually warring over you. When you were laying in your bed and you said it was like people who were over you, it was almost like you were on an operating table, and it was almost like they were dissecting you. Okay. Or they were examining you kind of like you were on an auction block. Okay. So what's happening here, when you had like the dream of the mansion and there were a bunch of people in the mansion, that mansion was actually your body. Okay. That mansion was your body. When you look at the word mansion in its root form, okay, when we take it back to the Latin, mansion means dwelling place. Okay. So it's just like in the Bible where it says, in my Father's house, there are many mansions. If it were not so, I would not have told you. Right? When Jesus said that. Well, what he was saying is that in my Father's house, there are many dwelling places. Okay. Because my Father's house, you're the dwelling places. The mansion, the dwelling place is the dwelling place of God. Okay. So what's happening here, you have these entities who are trying to cozy up and partner themselves with God. You're God, you as God. And what's happening is that they're trying to take your body apart in order to get in to do it. Okay. This is the feeling that you've been feeling. You said, it started as a sleep paralysis. Well, think about it. When you are in surgery, you're given an anesthetic, and that anesthetic paralyzes you. And you recalled several beings being over here, and then you had a ringing that developed inside of your head, which developed into a static inside of your brain. All of that is a frequency. Okay. When you have a ringing, what's a ringing? A ringing is a tone. And then it developed into a static frequency. Again, I want you to think of your head like a radio station. So what's happening is that you're having entities who are trying to tune into your frequency. So what you're undergoing is not necessarily a psychic attack, but an attempted a psychic invasion. Okay. You're having entities that are trying to intrude on your psychic and auric body. And luckily, your subconscious is showing you while it's actually going on. It's like when they do the surgery, but they don't actually put the person under. So you get to see everything that is happening. So that's what's going on with you, brother. And in terms of, like you said, you have been studying astral projection and things like that. Well, you don't necessarily need a teacher, but one of the things you did say is that you had a guide. Now, the only people who need guide through the astral planes are the people who do not have subepidermal melanin, or what we also call neuromelanin. Okay, so if you do not have neuromelanin, okay, well, everyone pretty much has subepidermal. Some people don't have epidermal melanin. But what that means is that you most likely need a melanin recharge. Okay, especially the fact that you were feeling pain in your right frontal lobe. Now, when you're dealing with the right frontal lobe of your brain, you're dealing with your cognitive thought, but you're also dealing with the things that identify your speech and language patterns. This is very similar, again, when we go back to the Bible and we understand the science of 666, the mark of the beast, which they say was actually the number of man. Okay, and it would go into the forehead and it would go into the palm of the hand. Well, when we understand 666, we understand that 6 is also the same thing as the letter Z, which you have in your name, and it's also the same thing as the letter S, which is the number of man. 6 is also the number for carbon. Okay, so what's happening here is this is a melanin issue. Okay, when your melanin is right, you don't need a guide. Your melanin is the guide. Okay, and you're not building and strengthening your melanin. You've created a pathway in for these entities to try to intrude. Okay, so the answer here is you have to do melanin work. You have to get, and this may sound very simple, but it usually is very simple, dark fruits, my brother. You have to start digging into your dark fruits again. You're not eating enough fruits in your diet. That's part of your problem. And you have to start really working on charging up the melanin. Don't try to have a conversation with these beings, whether you think they're benevolent or they're malevolent. They're all the same thing. They're trying to get somewhere and get you to raise them up to a place that they do not belong. They do not belong beyond the astral planes. And what they're trying to do is hitch a ride. Okay, they're trying to hitch a ride on your ship. Now notice, and I'm just gonna have to shout you out, brother. Your name and your signing is Zahir Dimensional Interface. So if you gave yourself that name, Dimensional Interface, you're telling these beings from various dimensions, hey, you can I'm the interface that you could use to get where you want. Okay. So you might want to I'm not saying change anything, but consider the energy that you're putting out. Now, like you said, one of the things, you were fighting these demons and you were using a serpent type weapon. I believe you said that had like 1,000 teeth on it. Well, obviously we know that's a Leviathan that you were talking about. Okay, that the beast with many monsters, and it's a serpent. And you said the people were going into the water, and when they went into the water, they started to glow. You need to go back and listen to my Oduduwa and Olokun broadcast. Okay, and you need to study and understand the energy of Leviathan, and you need to start invoking Leviathan, because obviously the Leviathan, or the Hellmouth, which is what it was also called, is a charm for you. Now, one of the things you said is that when people started going into the water, they started glowing, because what was happening is that they were stripping themselves of their carnal bodies, and you were seeing their glorified bodies. Okay, but the passing through was through this mansion, which is really, you said, okay, a lot of people would committed murders and things in the mansion. This mansion is actually your body. Okay, so once you understand that, I think you'll be able to dissect a little bit better exactly what's going on with you. But you apply the solutions that I gave you, and then it will become more clear to you. Okay, so let's get on to our show, and well, really, we're on the show, but let's get on to our tribute to the energy of the Sangoma. All right, well, I won't get too deep in terms of the various components of the Sangoma tradition, because it would be like going deep into the various components of the Yoruba tradition. We'd be here all year. So what I really want to touch upon is how, because, you know, this work with our new spiritual order and the Anu Nation is about really tying in the Pan-African spiritual experience, but also the Pan-Indigenous spiritual experience, and showing how we can actually connect the dots through our various traditions and gain some measure of unity and finally get on one accord. So I really want to highlight in this segment the correlations, relations, and the similarities between Sangoma and what maybe you might already be practicing. And maybe it can help you to see the Sangoma as some of yours as well. Okay? But let's just deal with Sangoma in terms of a geographical piece. All right. So we know obviously this is a tradition from the Bantu people, and the Bantu people in this region, we call them South Africans or people from Swaziland or the Zulu. All right. And this is a tradition that is typically much like the Orisha tradition, is very much ran by women. Okay. So you have who we call Isi Sangoma. And Isi Sangoma is Isisangoma. And Isi means one who does something. So an Isi Sangoma is really a verb whenever you see that. One of the most notable Sangoma that many of you have probably heard of is Kredro Mutwa. And Kredro Mutwa, who has let us all know that he is a high priest of Sangoma, which is sometimes mistakenly called Ishi Sangoma or Isangoma. Okay. But Kredro Mutwa deals with a lot of astral plane travel, which is really, when we're dealing with Sangoma, they are master astral travelers, because their readings and much of their work come through possession. Okay. And they're oftentimes possessed by who we call the Litlotis. And the Litlotis are Egun, or ancestors as we know them, but not necessarily an Egun or ancestor that may exist in their own personal bloodline, but just an Egun or ancestor period that seeks to work with them, which is a key idea. You know, a lot of times when people set up their ancestral work or the ancestral, spaces, they don't actually make sure that they're working with ancestors who want to work with them. They just say, oh, okay, I found out my grandfather was a so-and-so, and so I'm going to build a shrine to him, and, we're going to go from there. And you may be working with, even though it's your blood ancestor, you may be working with an entity that's just not interested. It's just not that into you. Okay? So what's good about the Sangoma tradition is that they ensure and they make sure that the entities, the Litlotis that they work with, are working with them. Okay? Now, we know coming out of that Zulu tradition, with the Sangoma, the Zulu itself within culture and by name connotes a certain level of spirituality, and connotes a certain level of spiritual and celestial connection. Why is that? Because the word Zulu, or Amazulu, which is what it was previously, or sometimes you'll hear KwaZulu, it means the people of the heavens. Okay, so here we already have another example in our indigenous spirituality where the location of their origins is clearly not on the planet Earth. It's extraterrestrial. Terrestrial, meaning Earth or Terra, but it's post or pre or super Terra. Okay, so unlike when you have the Greek mythology or you have the Roman mythology, when they're dealing with their idea of heaven or their highest place or where their gods exist, all of their gods still exist on the planet of Earth, because that's as far as their vision was able to see, but they just exist in a place that's really hard to get to. So you have to climb the highest mountain and you'll end up in Valhalla, or you'll end up in Olympus, and so forth and so on. But whenever you deal with these indigenous traditions, okay, even when you deal with the Yoruba, and we're told about the Iroko tree, which is the oldest tree, the Iroko tree, and how that tree was planted, and there were different entities that came off that tree, but who came from Orun, or even a gold chain, or sometimes it's the iron chain that was dropped down from Orun, and people descended, or more importantly, these primordial energies descended. Okay, so what that really deals with is, again, the concept that the heaven, or the higher place of the fifth dimension is not here on the planet. So therefore, that means at our origins and at our best, we're not planetary beings or earthlings. Okay, we're not earthlings. We're not actually beings of the earth. So the Sangoma tradition and the Zulu tradition really speaks about this in a very subtle and sometimes not so subtle way. Again, KwaZulu not only means the people of heavens, but it also means the people of Mars, the planet that we know as Mars, which we also know to be the red planet, or in many senses, it's the planet of Aries, which of course Aries is symbolized by the ram, and if you spell ram backwards, you get Mars again, or Mar. Okay, but even in that sense of the ram, we know that this is Ogun. This is the Ogun energy. This is Ogun's planet. Now, dealing with the Sangoma, we see an interesting word in there, because Sangoma is spelled S-A-N-G-O-M-A. Now, I already know you picked up on it. S-A-N-G-O, Shango. Okay. Now, interesting enough, the typical colors and uniform of the Sangoma is colored red and white. And the word Sangoma means people off the drum, or people from the drum. It also means people from the drum who play with fire. Very interesting, right? Because we're coming all the way down here to South Africa. Okay, to Zululand, and we're hearing that Sangoma or Shangoma means that people off the drum who play with fire. Well, doesn't Shango hold fire in his mouth? Isn't Shango known as the drummer? He plays the bata drummer, and when that thunder comes down, it's the sound of Shango playing his drums. And Shango even destroyed his kingdom of Oyo with the fire that came from his mouth, that he got from the charm from Eshu when he learned how to spit fire from his mouth. Very interesting, because now when we deal with the Shangoma or the Sangoma, we have the same colors of red and white. We have the same concept of fire, and more importantly, we're dealing here with drumming. We're dealing here with drumming. The people off the drum are the Sangoma. Okay, so in that sense, let's get into the idea and the concepts and the philosophy of the Sangoma. Okay, one of the things that they do is that they do readings. Of course, it's one of the places where we got the origins of the idea of the bone readings. Okay, but they deal with possession, and part of what they do in possession, they go to a certain plane of being, similar to how we have in our Orisha tradition, and you hear me oftentimes talk about the Okan. Okay, well, the Sangoma have a similar place that they go to as well, and in that realm is where they go with the Lidlotis, and they pull answers. Okay, to the question that those come to them, when they're doing divination sessions, and also is where they go to tap into their healing potential and their healing information as to what plants and what herbs and what salves would do what. The Sangomas were always known as the protectors of their region. When we're dealing with the KwaZulu, they were always known as the protectors. And again, like I said, most often were women. Okay, and then you had another aspect of the Sangoma called the Inyanga. Okay, and that's spelled Nyanga, or sometimes you'll see it spelled Inyanga. And Inyanga is the herbalist, is the one who deals with herbs. Very similar in our Yoruba to the Eshegun. Isegun, Eshegun. Now, the Eshegun is the one who deals with herbs, okay? But when we have the Inyanga and we're dealing with Palo, which is just a little higher up, we're in South Africa. If we just go up a little bit to the Congo, and we have the concept of the Inyanga or the Inyanga. And what is that? Right? It's the Nganga. It's the pot. Okay, so the Nganga is the pot where we create the universe, where we create our own worlds, where our Nkisis live. Well, the Inyanga is the person who deals with the herbs of the world, where they can create their own universe or create their own outcome, where they're dealing with that energy, that alchemical energy of Osayin, which we're going to get into at the end of this month again. But Osayin, again, dealing with that alchemy. How do I take this little plant and turn it into something that will bring someone back to life or hurry someone to the grave? How can I do that with this one little berry? I must be able to look into this berry, and even though it may be only the size of my finger or maybe the size of my pinky, I must be able to transport my spiritual body into this little herb or this plant or this berry and see the whole entire universe of this. And now focus and direct its one intention of the world of this herb or this berry and berry into one thing that I need. Okay, so if you could imagine, it's like that old movie, I think it was the 80s, Honey, I Shrunk the Kids. If you could imagine, let's say, taking a mint leaf, and it's just a regular little mint leaf, right? What could it really do? Imagine if you could shrink yourself small enough to a microscopic level and go inside of that mint leaf and go inside and rewire what that mint leaf is and what it's supposed to be. So though it was for flavoring or cooling or smell, now you're making it to wake up, the warrior energy of a person. Okay, because you've went inside of it and totally rewired it. Okay, you transported yourself into it after you shrunk yourself. Okay, so this is what happens when we perform alchemy. Our spirit projects itself into a substance and then transmutates that substance into what we need it or want it to be. Very similar to the process of saying what we call grace or giving thanks for our food. We're actually transporting our spirit into that food to tell the food, this is what I need you to be. This is what I need you to represent and turn yourself into. It's the alchemy. Okay. And that's whenever you have concepts of fire, like I said, the Sangoma, that word means the people off the drum who deal with fire. Fire is a transmutation of something. Whenever fire touches something, it changes. Nothing can touch fire and not be changed. Even if it's something like steel or iron, it's still going to heat up. It's going to change on some level. Okay, so the Sangoma, not only are they speaking in tongues, not only are they going into possession, not only are they interpreting dreams, not only are they, healing people of various energies, but these are people who have mastered the science of alchemical process through the fire, the drumming, the possession, and the vibration of Shango. Okay, so the Sangoma are children of Shango. The Sangoma are children of Shango. So that relates us right back into our situations. Now, of course, a man can be a Sangoma. Credo Mutua is a man, okay? And he's a Sangoma. So it's not necessarily that only women are Sangoma, but you find they typically deal with that energy, because when you're dealing with the Sangoma, you're also dealing with the concept of the serpent, which is very prevalent in that tradition. Now, the serpent, again, takes us back to Mami Wata. If anybody's ever seen images of Mami Wata, if you have not, I would suggest that you go and check out Mami Wata, or even Pampagira, all right? And these two images often are seen holding or playing with snakes, okay? Now, what is the holding or playing with the snake? Mami Wata usually has a snake wrapped around her. Okay, but the snake represents the Kundalini energy and the people who have the ability to raise it and lower it at will. Again, this is a person playing with fire. Where's that fire? That's the fire of Kundalini. When the snake goes to the top of your head and Shiva meets with Shakti. Okay, but it's the fire that's at the base of your spine. Now, interesting enough, you have the same concept of Kundalini and the Sangoma tradition, but it's called Upalini. The words are so similar. You have to understand at some point that the entire continent was connected. Okay, so that raising up of the fire, raising up of your energy, raising up of your higher self, we know that it starts with fire, because fire is life. Things come from fire. One of the key things with the Sangoma is you have what's called falasa. And falasa is when they actually vomit. They induce vomiting in order to clean the system. A lot of times you hear me talk about the blood needing to be clean. This is a concept that I understood from my Sangoma training, is that we have to keep our blood and our bodies clean so that we can be attractive to spirits. Okay. And of course, this is in many different systems, but it's really stressed in the Sangoma system that you maintain a very clean system, very clean body. It's very interesting too. Malcolm X, or El Hajj El Malik Shabazz, who was clearly a Sangoma. A Shango energy. The person with the autopsy on his body, he made an interesting note. He said that when he did the autopsy on El Hajj El Malik Shabazz's body, that it was the cleanest body that he had ever come in contact with. He said that he had never dealt with a body as clean as his. It's very interesting when you kind of think about it. When you think about the energy that he represented and what he did, that fiery tongue, okay, that Shango style energy, even the fact that he had red hair. He was called Detroit Red, okay? Again, Shango type energy. And if you even look at the energy of the Honorable Elijah Muhammad, he has a very calm and cool Obatala type energy, a very calm, withdrawn, but brilliant type of mindset. And this was a father and son relationship that they had. Okay. But, getting back again to the idea of the Sangoma, and let's deal with their initiation. they call it Dwasa. Okay, and the Ithwasa, because remember E or Iso is someone who's doing something. The Ithwasa is the person who's actually, actually it's Itwasa is the person who's actually going through the initiation. And Twasa means when the moon first appears, or more so when the moon reflects the light of the sun. Okay, it's that new moon. Now the new moon, as I tell everyone, is when you should be doing your ancestral work, especially for those who are doing the kin, or I've taught that too, or giving information on how to do kin. You should be doing that on a new moon. That's when you do ancestral work. Okay, so very interesting. The light of the new moon, or the emergence of the new moon, is signified by the emergence of new initiates into the Sangoma tradition. Okay, but now we also understand the light reflects the light of the sun. Now the sun in our zodiac, which would be Obatala, the one, but also comes from the solar chakra, and many times people associate the solar or the one to Shango. Okay, even though he comes with the lightning and he comes with the fire, but he's also that confidence and that self-identity of I'm the one, I know who I am, I'm the king. Okay, so it's almost like you have this constant Sangoma process of affirming and reaffirming their connections and their child, or their parental and child relationship to the energy that we know as Shango, or some of us may know as Shango. Okay, but you have many different aspects of the Sangoma, and like one of the things that I said earlier, we were dealing with the name, even Sangoma, and the name of the Zulu, right? And we said that the Zulu meant the people from the heavens. Now, when we're dealing with Shango, we know that Shango relates to our zodiac sign of Aquarius, and Aquarius's planet is Uranus, or Uranus, all right? And very similar to Ogun, his planet being Mars, but Uranus actually is a compilation of two different words, and the compilation is and Anu. Anu. Anu is actually the right way to say Uranus or Uranus, which is so much more fun to say. But Anu, when you're dealing with signifies deity, just like El, or just like Al. All right, and I've gone on this a million times, so to go back all into that. But it signifies deity. Anu means the people from heavens. In the Bible, all right, Anu was used whenever we see the word heaven. It was translated from Anu to heaven. So heaven is actually Uranus, or Uranus, or Anu. Okay, this is the place in the home of Shango. Now, so when the Zulus say that we are the people of the heavens, or we are the people who come from Mars, or from heavens, they're saying we come from these two planets, which happen to be warriors, and not just warriors, but brothers in the Yoruba system, Ogun and Shango. Now, let's go back to it. I've often said that Shango was Shaga Zulu. Now, I've had some friendly debates on this amongst my colleagues, because many people some of them have said that they believe that Shango was Ogun. Okay, maybe, but I see Shaga Zulu as Ogun. I see Shaga Zulu as Shango. I certainly see the Shaga Zulu as Shango, especially based on his name. But let's just say if he was Ogun, right? And he came with he definitely, even if he was Shango, he came with an Ogun avatar. No doubt about that. Coming with the harder weaponry, he forged a different type of spear, made it shorter. Everything with him was like he was called the War Machine. That was one of his names, the War Machine. And they called himself the Giant Elephant, or the Great Elephant, because he would stomp through and just level everything. This was an Ogun energy, right? But he had a nephew that we celebrate and we revere as one of the Nkisi and Palo. Okay, and in Palo, sometimes you see an Nkisi by the name of Siete Rayos. Siete Rayos. Now, for those of you who know your Spanish, Siete Rayos means 7 rays. Okay, 7 rays, Siete Rayos. But what's more interesting about that, if you actually understand the origin of Siete Rayos, because remember, Palo is not Spanish, Palo is Congolese. All right, and I know it's a little difficult sometimes when you want to get in the Palo and you don't speak Spanish, because most of it is, taught or has been embraced by the Latino community, which is excellent. But some people have a little trouble connecting, identifying with the language and the culture, and even the inclusion of some of the Catholic saints into it. But you get it where you get it. Wherever you can get your information, you get it. And you make it your own in time. You make it your own. But in any event, so we have Siete Rayos, who correlates us and connects us to the energy of Shango. And just so you know, his counterpart is Centella Ndoki. Centella Ndoki is a woman of storms, whirlwinds. So who is this? Of course, we know this is Oya. So Oya is Centella Ndoki. Shango would be Siete Rayos. And Ogun would be Zarabanda. We even have an Eshu, who most times is referred to as Lucero. And their brother, again, Ochosi, who will be Matalumbo, who has an assistant by the name of Katinde, or Matalumbo. Okay, but anyway, let's get back to the Sete Rayos. The great Shaga Zulu, and that's how you say it, Shaga. So if you're wondering who I'm talking about, many refer to him as Shaka Zulu, but his name was actually pronounced Shaga Zulu. All right, and Shaga Zulu had a nephew who also beat the hell out of the English, because one of the greatest massacres to date that the Britons have ever suffered was the massacre or the behind whooping that Shaga Zulu put on them. Okay, only rivaled by Hannibal's work in Carthage, in Rome. Okay, but he had a nephew who was just as fierce and just as feared, and who rode on the energy of his uncle Shaga, and his name was Shetewayo. Shetewayo. Shetewayo is where we get the name Siete Rayos. So we actually have been taught that Siete Rayos, who is an Nkisi, is actually means 7 rays, and there is a science to the 7 rays. Okay. And we'll get into that at some point when I go into the Palo. At some point, I'm gonna do a show on the Palo and Kisis and break those down to you. But in any event, Siete Rayos was a deified ancestor, because remember, when we're dealing with Sangoma, we're mainly dealing with ancestral energy. But he was deified to the point that they actually made him an Nkisi. Very similar to what we've been taught about the Orisha Oduduwa, which is untrue, but hey. But Orangan is one, okay, who was a hunter and was a king. And we understand that at one point he was told that he was deified. But again, it's not necessarily true. But this was one where Siete Rayos had performed his work to such brilliance and to such military and strategic excellency that he was actually named to be as like a god. And that was Siete Rayos, which eventually became Siete Rayos, which of course now is Siete Rayos. It takes away from the African story of it, which is kind of interesting. So this kind of relates to our last show of Sankofa. And of course, it's purposeful that we come from Sankofa to Sangoma. Very similar sounding words, because they both are dealing and diving back into the annals and the wisdom of the ancestors. Okay, these are ancestral ideas, ancestral traditions. Okay, one of the cool things that you also find about the Sangoma, especially when they're bringing someone through Twasa, the person is not really eating any meat. Okay, it's like a vegetarian style diet. And interesting enough too is that most Sangomas sleep on the floor. Okay. Those who have hosted me before, when we've done certain spiritual work and consecrations, that's always come up before. I've always said, no, I'll just sleep on the floor. I actually enjoy sleeping on the floor. I tend to. And I can sleep in a bed too, but the floor is just fine for me. I like the floor. I like the vibration. I like the humility that the floor brings. And it was very amazing to me many years ago when I found out that this was a part of sleeping on that straw mat was one of the key things that you had to do when you're going through your Sangoma initiation. There are not many Sangomas in North America. There are people who have posed themselves as such. I'm not going to mention any names at all. You will have to do the research for yourself and find them. But the way they read is through throwing bones, as some like to call it. But there's a various tool set within their sets. In terms of the divination sets, you might have shells in there. Oftentimes you'll have animal bones, pieces of glass, shells, dominoes, coins, different animal parts, and even little pieces of cloth. But each one means something different. And the way it falls and the way it points speaks about a different aspect of a person's life. Sangoma readings are amazing. And if you ever get an opportunity to receive one, I definitely urge you to. At some point, maybe I will be offering Sangoma readings through our website. I won't be doing them, but I do have some colleagues who are Sangoma who could work with you and do those type of readings for you in time. But in any event, so that is our Sangoma connection to our energy of Shango. And it shows you here that how important the element of fire is. The element of fire as it raises us up, that fire that sits at the base of the spine, what they call the blue fire. And when it raises up, that snake that's dealt with, this is very similar to Brother Zaire's email that we just received when he was battling with the snake. Okay. That fire is a key element of many of our traditions. And of course, we know when we're dealing with Shango, we have Shango all throughout the Caribbean, the Shango Baptist, man, and all the volcanoes and things there where Shango keeps seeming to come up. Because of course, we know the Shango is a very popular, Orisha, and a very popular energy. And they all have appeared at different times in different places and have gotten different types of names. But if you really look deeply and you really look hard, you'll see they're talking about the same exact energy, the same exact thing. So the Sangoma are dealing with Shango, or the Shangoma. All right. So in true Zulu fashion, I will sign off. This has been a wonderful show, and I'm glad that I've been able to share this. That's why it's been wonderful for me, because I have a wonderful affinity or great respect and admiration for the Sangoma tradition and what Sangoma represents and Sangoma brings, and dealing with that ancestral energy, and more importantly, dealing with the science of the drum. And I've already broken that one down. Where there's a show, if you haven't listened to that one, where I talked about the drum and the difference between the conga and the djembe, and I think I even hit the bata drum in there a little bit. But if you haven't checked that out, check that out. But again, you see the correlations here. Sangoma itself means the people off the drum who play with fire. And this is who Shango is, the man who plays the drum, who spits fire from his mouth. So in any event, in Zulu fashion, Sang Banang Bangani Bam, which means I greet you, that's to the group. And we will speak again very soon. All right. Peace.
We thank you for your listening support and urge you to become an active participating member of the ANU Order. Please be sure to follow our Ustream broadcast, which can be found at ustream.tv/channel/enlightenment-transformation. That is ustream.tv/enlightenment-transformation. Also, please be sure to sign up for the ANU newsletter, which can be found by going to anunation.org. That is ANUNATION.org. If you'd like to become a sponsor or an on-air guest on this or any of our other broadcasts, please be sure to contact us at questions@anunation.org. That is the word questions at anunation.org. Thank you for your continued support, and be well.